Okay, so perhaps you've seen mocking images of this face and Matt Damon, or this one and Samurai Stanley, maybe two balls here, something about XDefiant, sale to Tencent. In some way, you are aware that Ubisoft is having a bad time, but you might be wondering what the full story is. Well, I thought I had you covered when I made most of this video in October, but wow, they just can't stop screwing up, can they? If you watch that video and you only want to see the new stuff, there's a timestamp here, also in the description. For the rest of you, let's unpack this horrible year and what led up to it. The first thing you need to know is that this is not a new problem for the company, and anybody that's saying complaints are just grifting is tipping their hand that they only started paying attention a couple of months ago. Ubisoft is an old company, and at one point they were putting out some of the best games, so they had a pretty loyal following and a large bank of consumer trust. Sadly, a few years ago, they started burning it, and 2024 seems to be the year that the majority of their customers had enough.
I swear you guys rip on me 13 or 14 more times, I'm out of here.
Now, the term Ubisoft game is also pretty vague because the company is massive, and they have a studio called Massive. Their website says they have over 45 studios under their brand, employing 20,000 people in 30 countries. Despite this enormous pool of potential, they have grown infamous for pretty much making the same style of game for the last decade. It's an open world game that is huge, but feels empty. The user interface is cluttered with a dozen markers showing you all of the repetitive tasks that you can complete. Each interaction feels the same, the story is bland, and the art direction and actual gameplay is aggressively okay. Basically, their games are bloated with plenty of places to go and lots to do, but it's like being at an all-you-can-eat oatmeal buffet. Oh, you made more, there's more. Oh, that's great. Now, if that were all, I don't think that we'd be talking about them, because I am a big defender of not changing things up just to be novel. Some people like this style of game, and that's just fine. Those folks will never be at a loss for what to play because these games get churned out constantly. Personally, I like Dark Souls style games, and I play a lot of them. I want more of them, and I'm not looking for novelty. Please, just keep making this style of game in different settings, perhaps. And a sequel to Bloodborne and Sekiro, please? Please? There are also some good games in their catalog, just not that many of them. Personally, I can vouch for Child of Light, which is kind of old, and Immortals Phoenix Rising, which should have been called Gods and Monsters, much catchier name, but they may have changed it because Monster Energy Drink said it was a copyright infringement? Anyway, sadly that one still has hints of the company's lazy greed. The DLCs are horrible. One of them is just an Asian-inspired reskin of the main game. What began to turn Ubisoft's customers off is that it started to feel like they were using the audience instead of serving them. Yeah, the games began to feel bloated and phoned in instead of curated, but the worst offense is that they got greedy. Ubisoft games started including microtransaction stores in their single-player games. It's disgusting that I can call this normal, but here we are. And at first, Ubisoft was doing normal microtransactions, which were purely cosmetic. Now, this still bothers me in a single-player game, and it's tangible evidence of the harm that live service and free-to-play games are causing in the games industry. Like, I understand that Fortnite is a free game, and they're supported by kids buying outfits, but now we've all become conditioned to calling cosmetic items that cost real money harmless. In a full-priced, single-player game, selling in-game items is saying to the customer, hey, we had artists make all of this, and it only works in this game that you already paid for, and you're the only one that's gonna see these, but we held some of it back because we want more of your money. Oh, and we saved the coolest, shiniest ones for sale. Instead of selling you an experience where these things are scattered throughout the game world and you get the pleasure of finding or earning them, you know, the basic dopamine cycle foundation that games are built upon, they put in a paid fast track, and in most cases, the only way to get some of this stuff is to pay up. It is a disgusting practice, and the reason its rise in use goes hand in hand with the overall downgrade in game quality is because it represents the attitude shift in the industry. It used to be that a game was made at the best quality possible to entice the customer, but now that customer is viewed as livestock to be fleeced continuously.
See? I told you! They milked you!
I, on the other hand, view you as a real person with fingers that can be used to press that like button. That one was certified organic. I am back with my Ravenclaw cup. I don't know if I ever showed you guys this one. I got it from Barnes & Noble. I've got some Turkish coffee in here with some steamed cream, which I don't think is authentic, but it's my coffee and I'll do what I want. Now with Ubisoft, it doesn't end at cosmetic purchases. In some of their games, they also included items or services that you could buy that would affect the game itself. In their Assassin's Creed, Ghost Recon, The Division, For Honor, and Far Cry games, they had in-game shops selling experience boosts, weapons with damage boosts or other assistance, speeding up crafting, or just purchasing game resources. But first, you have to buy in-game currency before you can do any of that, which carries two manipulations. One, it mentally separates the actual price of the item from real dollars. That thing isn't $10, it's only 600 Helix credits or whatever. The other manipulation is that you can't buy 600 credits, you can buy 500 or 1100 or something. Each item is designed to add up to just below or just above the available amount of credits. That way you always have some left over, which makes you think that your next purchase is cheaper because you already had some credits. In some of their games, the story will even give you a small amount of these credits, just enough to buy one small item, which gets you used to using the shop and makes you think, well, maybe you should just buy some more right now because they already gave you some, so you're like already halfway to buying this other cool thing that just so happens to be on the screen. Converting to the game's currency before you buy is called currency obfuscation. It removes the purchase from real dollars in your mind, leading you to think that the thing you are buying doesn't cost real money. And the hot dogs to buns mismatch of how much currency you can buy versus how much everything costs, that's called currency fragmentation. These tactics work together to make billions of dollars every year in the mobile game and free-to-play games like Fortnite, which all by itself has made over $26 billion in the last 7 years. That is why everyone is doing this. What this can result in is game design that purposely drags out progression or limits game resources, hoping that you'll just spend some cash to speed things up. This is a pretty scummy tactic, even when it's done in free games like Diablo Immortal, but we generally understand the deal with those. The game is free, so it's got some roadblocks to entice some spending. It is beyond unacceptable when a full price game does this. Now, there's no hard proof that Ubisoft is doing it. However, after a couple of games got away with it, 2020's Assassin's Creed Valhalla was extraordinarily bloated, but included some experience boosts and ways to speed the game up, and this was not lost on many players. Another thing to note is that Ubisoft launched a streaming service for their games in 2018, initially called Uplay Plus and then Ubisoft Plus, which may have affected game design as well, but we're going to touch on that a little bit later. Over the years, the company heard that you kids like RPGs, so they tacked on some leveling and skill tree elements that have only further bloated the games or been used as a gatekeeping mechanic because, well, that enemy is 2 levels higher than you, so they have a modifier that does 800% extra damage. Play some more and come back later. The company is having PR issues outside of their games as well. In 2020, many employees came forward and horrific stories began leaking about the toxic and abusive work environments in multiple studios. Some of their larger branches, like Ubisoft Montreal, Toronto, Paris, and Singapore, all had awful stories about middle, upper, and executive level managers holding grudges against anyone who spoke up, making insane sexual comments to workers, and worst of all, that all the complaints that absolutely were filed were pretty much ignored by HR. It was a massive story causing multiple resignations, firings, internal investigations, and lawsuits against the company. It also explained why most of the games are terrible, because as the California Milk Advisory Board taught us, good cheese comes from happy cows. It also caused even more negative attitude from consumers. Finally, in late 2023, they released Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, and I think that it finally set in for a lot of people that Ubisoft just makes the same game, no matter what. This one got very average reviews, and it's basically Far Cry, but you're blue now. So, going into 2024, the general attitude toward Ubisoft was already smoldering, and this year has been one giant tire fire.
Now, most of the kids dislike you, pretty much hate you. You know that, right?
The year started bad and got worse, beginning with Skull and Bones, Ubisoft's pirate ship battle game. The mocking started immediately when Ubisoft said this wasn't a AAA game, the name that we use for high-budget, large studio games that, until recently, had extremely high quality. Oh no. This game was going to be so mind-blowingly amazeballs, the CEO said it was going to be the first quadruple A game. Ubisoft did have precedent for making this because the last really excellent entry into their Assassin's Creed series was in 2013. That was a pirate game called Black Flag, which was a lot of fun and had neat mechanics with fleet management, satisfying ship travel and combat, and sea shanties.
Come all you young sailor and listen to me. I'll sing you a song of the fish in the sea, and it's windy weather, boys, stormy weather, boys, when the wind blows, we're all together, boys, blow ye winds westerly, blow ye winds blow, jolly sou'wester, boys, steady she go.
That's in your head now, and honestly, you're quite welcome. Skull and Bones was gonna be a slam dunk because it was originally supposed to be a Black Flag spin-off, just minus the Assassin's Creed bits with probably some more multiplayer elements added in. Skull and Bones then took over a decade to make and suffered in every layer of development hell, from scope and feature creep to not knowing what genre of game they were even making, to toxic management, to live service garbage bloat, to game engine revamping mid-project. This poor thing saw it all. They went from Black Flag sequel to open world survival pirate game to only arena 5-on-5 ship battles to live service MMO style pirate game, finally ending up as the generic open world Ubisoft game that they are now infamous for, but pirate flavored. It was originally scheduled for 2018, but saw multiple delays, finally flopping onto the market in February of this year. And flop it did, garnering atrocious review scores from critics and the audience alike. Now, this is not too shocking after a decade of development at a large studio, but recent reports citing supposed Ubisoft insiders estimate the total price tag for this flotsam between $650 and $850 million.
That's a lot of money!
The bad PR kept coming when this article came out about Ubisoft's attempt to get their streaming service off the ground. This right here might be the only semi-nice thing that I say about the company in this whole video, because this one thing was overblown and taken out of context. In context, it's still not amazing, but the headlines made it sound more evil than it really was. During an interview, Philippe Tremblay, head of subscription services, was talking about the struggles of trying to get their subscription service off the ground. One struggle that he did not mention, because this company has no self-awareness, is that there's no point subscribing to a service where every game is the same. I'm sorry, I said I was going to be nice in this section. He's talking about how players are skittish about subscription services because they enjoy the idea of physically having the games, and he uses his own movie collection to illustrate the point. There is something nice about having your physical thing, and he goes on to describe how players should feel comfortable because the online games will always be there and their save data is stored and all of that. But for the subscription service to succeed, and here's the headline, players need to get comfortable with not owning their games. As I said, even in context, it's still not amazing. This is a consumerist nightmare where you keep a subscription forever because you might want to play that game again. And Ubisoft knows that forgetting or putting off canceling a subscription is a multi-billion-dollar business model. But when you just read that last line, people need to get comfortable not owning their games, it sounds flippant at best or sinister at worst. So this was a big PR blow, and it's the one singular time that I feel like they didn't deserve as much hate as they got. But then they did shut a game down and you can't play it anymore, so I guess even the online ones aren't safe. Oops. Things really went sideways in the spring with two game announcements, Star Wars Outlaws and Assassin's Creed Shadows. Each of these games had individual issues, but shared one thing in common. They employed the manipulative price structure tactics that Ubisoft was now leaning into. Here's how it works. You offer the base game at $70 US, but then you show a gold version for $110 that includes all these goodies like cosmetic crap and a bonus mission, extra content at a later date, and you get to play this single-player game early. Then they have the ultimate version for $130 that just has a couple extra outfits for the character. And then, in a blue-ringed box, you have everything in the Gold Ultimate Mega Super $130 edition, and then some, but only for $18 a month. Now, there are several manipulations going on here at once, so let's just break it all down. First, the base version is designed to look like it comes with nothing. It has all this empty space underneath of it. It even has a different picture above it. That's a different game entirely. Why would you go with that when you get twice the goodies with this second tier? And yeah, it's $110, but that's not as bad as $130 for the Ultra Mega Platinum Edition, which only has one extra thingy, and it's just outfits. So you, being a smart consumer, think that you're getting the best value by picking the middle option. They never intended for you to pick the top tier. That is only there for comparison to make the two next to it seem like better values. This is called price anchoring. Your brain tells you, hey, we got the best deal. We didn't even pay top dollar. And it's like a double kick on your normal brain. It is super effective. But what's this on the end? This button is a different color. It's got a bright blue box around it. The space below it is completely full of extras that you could get. And it's extremely cheap, only $18, but you get all the perks of the $130 version, plus more. What a steal! Subscriptions are designed to be forgotten, and Ubisoft hopes you'll forget, or at least wait to finish the whole game, or, like play the extra missions that they label as DLC, which is kind of the same thing. DLC means downloadable content, and is generally understood to be an expansion of the game. Ideally, DLC would represent a reward for good sales. Studios got all these extra game assets, maybe some story or areas that they weren't able to get into the base game, so they give the players more game in the future. Unfortunately, for some studios, DLC is just a marketing ploy to justify higher-priced versions. The first upcoming expansion for Star Wars Outlaws is called Wildcard and has you doing a few missions for Lando Calrissian. We'll find out very soon if it seems like this was something that should have been part of the base game that Ubisoft stripped out so they could sell it back to the players as an extra, but we know that they already have done this because the higher tier versions came with a season pass that included a bonus mission for Jabba the Hutt. Jabba is part of the base game, and you already do missions for him. So this bonus mission is obviously one that they plucked out of the game and pretended was extra to manipulate you into buying a pricier tier. Since they did that so blatantly, I have no reason to believe that Lando shouldn't be part of the base game, but they held him back as leverage to extract more money from the customer. So this season pass is likely just more manipulation.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
But that subscription is hurting their game development as well. The games are getting stale and everything feels like padding. The giant open worlds don't have much to do, or the same thing over and over. They are infamous for the cluttered UI, which shows you all the things you could be doing, so you feel like the game is full, like it has value. Everything in their games feels like it's designed to prolong your experience, but that doesn't mean it's a better experience. This is so you continue to stay subscribed, or use their in-game shops, or both. Those DLCs fit into this. For Outlaws, the first is due this fall, so Ubisoft is hoping that you'll subscribe to play the game in August, and then hold the subscription for just 2 or 3 months to play that DLC. You might cancel, but perhaps you'll come back in the spring with that second DLC. Each time you resubscribe, that's a chance for you to forget to cancel, or find another one of their bloated games to play, and they continue to get paid. It seems like Outlaws and Shadows were designed to prolong this model together. You sign up for Ubisoft Plus in August for Outlaws, hold on to it until October-ish for that DLC, keep holding because, well, Shadows is right around the corner in November, keep holding it through Christmas, you'll be getting some time off, maybe hang on for the first Shadows DLC, the second Outlaws DLC in the spring, but even if you cancel in January, when you go back to work or school, that's 5 months that they got, which is $90. And even right now, Some of your brains are telling you, well, but you got to play the top tier for 2 games. That's a value of $260. That number was set by the company. It's completely arbitrary, but it anchors the price in your mind so that $90 for 5 months feels like such a better deal. Our final psychological tactic is the so-called early access. Ubisoft claims both of these games are launching on a Friday, but players who cough up the ransom get to play 3 days early on Tuesday. If you look across the game industry, and even at Ubisoft's own history, almost all games launch on Tuesday. Sometimes Thursdays, almost never on Friday. And Ubisoft didn't make it a habit until they got the great idea to rebrand the traditional launch day as early access. So once again, they took something away that was standard and then tried to upsell it to you. This is the scummiest company. Sorry, there's one last manipulation. That pre-order bonus that you see listed under every version. For Outlaws, it was a paint job for your ship. For Shadows, it's a bonus mission, something they cut from the game and told you was special. Years ago, pre-ordering was a way to make sure that you had a physical copy waiting for you at your local game retailer because they only bought so many. When things started going digital, pre-orders weren't strictly necessary, so publishers began offering a slight discount, so usually $5, to entice you to invest in this unknown quantity. Now, we are in hell, and people are out here pre-ordering games for nothing. The game is digital, so they could get it anytime. They aren't even getting a discount, and the bonus is something tiny and pointless and should just be in the game, and oftentimes it is, and you can earn it later. Both games had one more thing in common, which was that their announcements came with no gameplay to sell them. It was just, hey, here's a Star Wars cinematic for a game, pre-order it, eat it up, nerds. Oh, yeah, here's that Japanese Assassin's Creed game you've been bugging us for a decade. We know you'll lap this crap up no matter what, so here's the pre-order button. Oh, you want gameplay? We'll show you gameplay when we feel like it. But each game had its own special flaws. For Star Wars Outlaws, it was the terrible looking animations and this non-attractive character model, which has come to be a signal for bad quality games. Drastically more often than not, a bad looking character is in a game that also doesn't play well, usually because the people making it do not have amazing gameplay experience as their top priority. I experienced another data point for this near circular Venn diagram recently when I played Flintlock Siege of Dawn. Here is the diamond-jawed main character with the modern side shave that all strong women need to have. A singular report from a former employee claims the character used to be different but was swapped after a management change. Please do keep in mind that this one report comes from Mark Kern. I think it should be taken with a grain of salt. What I can tell you is that I spent 2 hours actually playing the game, and it wasn't great. This one wants to be a Souls-like style, but that genre requires velvety smooth combat, and Flintlock just wasn't it. Overall, my review is that I was planning to explore it deeper, and then after the first weekend, I actually forgot about it. It's literally forgettable. So now this is a red flag, and as we'll see later, it was true in the case of Outlaws, scoring yet another point for the cheat code superpower that is pattern recognition, which gamers tend to be really good at. We're trained for it. We'll come back to Madame Damon in a minute. With Assassin's Creed Shadows, it was this guy, Yasuke, I think it's like Yasuka. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, so I'm gonna go with Yasuke. Little tip. If you're ever unsure, just lean into a terrible pronunciation, and then when people call you on it, you just tell them that you're being fastidious. Yasuke is obviously a ploy to get attention because deep down, the folks at Ubisoft know that they missed their window. Assassin's Creed Japan already got made. It's called Ghost of Tsushima, and it is amazing. Solid gameplay, both stealth and samurai, good revenge story, English dubs with lips that match, or full Japanese voice acting. It even has a Kurosawa mode. The UI is the total opposite of Ubisoft. The art direction is stunning in this one. I spent as much time in the photo mode as I did playing the game. I cannot recommend this game strongly enough. At this point, Assassin's Creed Japan is trend chasing an idea they should have been first to. Real quick, while we're here, I want to go on record as being optimistic about the sequel, Ghost of Yotai. I have heard that the voice actress is a little bit of a nut, and I did just say that diversity in main characters is usually a red flag of a lazy company these days. But I am an optimist, and I've played quite a few Sucker Punch games. I like this company. I'm holding out hope that this gal is isolated from the development, like she's just a crazy activist voice actor. We shall see. I want it to be good, because Tsushima, it's just... Anyway, AC Shadows knows they're behind the ball, and the best way to get people talking is to deliver a product that wows the customer, just blows their socks off. But since they're unable to do that, the second best way is to have a controversy. Ubisoft went to an expert to find out more about Yasuke, and that was Thomas Lockley. They asked if anything would be wrong with making Yasuke a full-on samurai.
And I said no. You know, like a liar.
It turns out he was lying and exaggerating in order to sell more of his books. Crazy. Now, Yasuke is a documented historical figure. Just next to nothing is actually confirmed about the guy, but none of that matters, because in Assassin's Creed games, you don't play as historical figures, you play around them. Like in one game, you play with Leonardo da Vinci. He is your arms dealer. You, the character, are an unnamed, unknown assassin who affects history invisibly. That is the whole point. The series began with meticulous historical study, and the people you killed really did die in the year and around the place where they died in the game. That was the unique hook of the series. It's real history, but let's overlay a conspiracy and a secret holy war on everything. So these announcements were not met with positivity, but unfortunately, things just kept getting worse. With Star Wars Outlaws, when the company finally provided real gameplay, it looked boring. The enemies stood around, not shooting at you. Their behavior was worse than games literally made 2 decades ago. The overall shooting looked lackluster, the weapons didn't seem to have any impact, and the entire experience felt too much like a game, and that deserves some qualification. Obviously, games are games, just like movies are movies, but sometimes a production feels too much like a color-by-numbers sheet. Recently, the Borderlands movie caught a lot of flack for this. Much of the plot and the dialogue felt like someone asked a chatbot, hey, what should action comedies have in them? And they ticked every box. Outlaws felt like that. Infiltrating a guard post? Oh, look, there's explosive barrels everywhere, and the guards are standing right next to them. They're even bright red. They're even hanging above where the guards are standing.
Lucky.
Not too long after that, journalists and YouTubers were invited to play a vertical slice during a game convention. They were allowed to play 3 separate 15-minute sequences, and everybody generally confirmed that the game felt a little bit generic. The only positive was that overall vibes felt good when you were wandering in the underbelly of some town. Ubisoft continued to put out reveals and grant journalists access, but it continued to look extremely average and generic, but with laser pistols and a smattering of Star Wars aesthetics. When the game launched, all was confirmed, and the general response was a resounding meh. Every review said the same thing. Hey, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to enjoy the Star Wars vibe when you're exploring the hideouts and the cantinas. But then you have to actually play the game, and it sucks. Here's another area where I'm talking about its extreme gameness. Like, in order to upgrade your speeder, you need a part, and only this person has it. After a sassy exchange, you're told there's only one of these parts, and it's at the very top of an Imperial base, and you get a quest to go fetch it. Once inside, you need to climb this big shaft with fans that turn on and off in a pattern, blowing into the shaft for some reason. Just kidding, I know it. The reason is so you can time them and get past them, because it's a game. How do you transition between fans? There are convenient handholds. Why are they there? So a game character can climb this obvious game level and get the prize at the top. A couple of holes in the wall in the middle of nowhere have treasure in them. That sort of thing feels goofy and padded. It's very code by numbers. Or in this example, and these are both from the same guy, Rad Brad. I kind of like watching him because he's generally positive. This isn't a mocking video. It was just a regular playthrough. Here we have standard sneak up and punch guards mechanics going on, and just please ignore the punching a helmet with your bare hands and knocking a guy out for a second. These guards don't see or hear each other being punched out. This is poor programming. This is lazy design. There were also stealth sections that would fail instantly if anyone spotted you, and those have never been popular in games. They also had a rhythm-based lock-picking mechanic that even they knew wasn't going to go well, and not just because it was used everywhere. The game shipped with a way to turn that padding off, thankfully. And then there were the game bug montages. This game was very buggy, which was a problem for the people who paid extra for early access, which again was a lie. Console players encountered some serious bugs, and Ubisoft responded quickly with a patch. But that patch required players to start the game over. So these people paid extra to be gaslit about playing early, and then, after investing time into the game, had to start over from scratch. But Ubisoft isn't heartless. They tried to make it up to them with 100 Ubisoft credits. These can be used in the Ubisoft store. Another store! You can buy in-game items for their games, or that 100 credits will get you a voucher for 20% off any game you want to buy. So if you played this game early, that means you spent at least $110 or $40 more than the base game, and they gave you a coupon for roughly $20 to $25 off your next upper tier purchase. And of course, this was just more manipulation to funnel players into the Ubisoft ecosystem. You get those credits when you buy games directly through Ubisoft. So if you do use them and you purchase a future game, that purchase will result in 60 or 80 more credits. Well gosh, now you're almost at 100 again. Just one more purchase from Ubisoft and you'll have another coupon. Does this feel like the currency fracturing that we discussed earlier with game currencies that never result in a clean amount left over? Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Hey gang, Editing Greg here. Just noticed something. I was grabbing a clip of this coupon on the Ubisoft website, and turns out there's a little disclaimer: you can't use it on pre-orders or new releases that are less than 3 months. So the people that pre-ordered this game got rewarded with a coupon that cannot be used for another pre-order or another new game. Amazing.
Outlaws has been out for a couple of months now, and there's been a report circulating around that the game only sold 1 million copies in its first month. Now, for a video game, that's actually a solid number, unless you are the size of Ubisoft and you are selling a game with the Star Wars logo on it. This should have been a slam dunk. And obviously everyone at Ubisoft thought so as well, so they didn't bother with making a quality product. Insiders claim that they really needed something like 5 million copies to call this one even a small success. And based on the amount they reportedly spent on Skull and Bones, I believe it. The company knows the game isn't great. They know they shipped half a product. So, like so many others, they've laid out a roadmap for updates and improvements. But unless they do something drastic like a No Man's Sky, a few patches and tweaks aren't going to reinvigorate this title. Now, Assassin's Creed Shadows is not out yet, and won't be this year now. To their possible credit, Ubisoft might be realizing that the jig is up, so they're trying to fix some things about the game. This game had even more bad press than Outlaws. It's been one misstep after another. As we've already covered, they are years late to the party when making a samurai assassin game, and their own customers have been asking for this for over a decade. When they finally obliged, they looked at the whole of Japanese samurai history, found 2 vague references to perhaps the only black guy recorded on the island for hundreds of years, and said,
Verb, I know we're gonna do today.
this is not a new franchise, and never before has a title set in a racially homogenous region had a main character that was not of that region. But Ubisoft is either trawling for controversy clicks, or they are genuinely so racist and condescending that they believe this is some kind of racial justice victory. Honestly, I could buy the latter because in the Struggle Olympics, Asians are basically white. I'm really sorry, guys. Hey, at least you're not alone. Pale Latinos are there too. But their insult to Japanese culture didn't end there. When making the fight music for this African man, they chose this Asian hip-hop infusion.
Not while I have breath in my lungs and a blade in my hand. I said kill him.
That did not go over well with well, anyone, really. But that's the tamest of the gaffes, because the real issue is that they invested zero research into Japanese history and culture. As I already said, their number one resource was Thomas Lockley, who was out to sell his own made-up history books. Beyond that, they confused Japanese and Chinese cultures, which is a big no-no for both groups. Now, to be fair, I didn't know about any of this stuff either, right? But I'm also not trying to sell a product based on Japanese history. The only part of Japanese culture that I know anything about is the street food. Hey, they make this stuff called okonomiyaki. It's like a sweet, savory pancake with shredded cabbage inside with fried pork belly on top, and it's covered in nori and bonito flakes with green onion and a sweet, savory soy sauce, barbecue sauce kind of thing, and mayonnaise. And I know that sounds like I just pulled food ingredients and descriptions from a bag, but holy crap, this stuff is amazing. You can go online, you can order the mix and the sauce, and I do suggest that Japanese mayonnaise. You are welcome. Anyway, the scene in the game trailer contained multiple inaccuracies that Japanese players noticed instantly. In the opening of this trailer, there is a field with Suzuki, or silvergrass, which has this appearance in the fall. Right next to it, we see a sakura tree, or Japanese cherry blossom, which I'm told are absolutely stunning in the spring when they bloom. For those of us in America, just imagine some foreign company is making an American history game or something, and it opens up in a pumpkin patch, and there are tulips growing all around. It would strike you as odd instantly, right? That's what I'm guessing Japanese players saw when they looked at this. In the trailer, the character is entering a village through a torii gate, which is used as an entrance to a temple. These things have a specific purpose, and if you're ignorant of the culture, like me, you just think, ah, cool, that's a really Japanese thing. And so if they're in the game, it signals that you're in an Asian area. It is possible he was leaving a temple area, right? I'm trying to steel man it. The character gets in a fight and spills some persimmons, which is a fall harvest, right next to a spring cherry blossom. There is also a shot of Nobunaga's meeting room, and apparently the tatami mats that people are sitting on are not shaped or sized correctly. The people are apparently not sitting correctly or following standard etiquette. There seem to be other architectural issues as well, like the ceiling is way too high. Some of the building architecture in the game is not correct, supposedly belongs in China. I think one or two issues like this would have been overlooked, but it seems like this game is portraying the equivalent of a Wild West American cowboy who's walking through a tulip-filled pumpkin patch with a newsy cap on his head, eating a croissant, heading toward his Tudor-style home armed with a spear on his back. These are the kinds of mistakes that you make when you engage in performative representation. They are also continuing the AC Odyssey and AC Valhalla pattern by adding in romance options, allowing you to play either character as gay or straight as you woo NPCs. Things got worse later when they approved this toy to be sold for the game. That is a broken, leaning torii gate, which, again, not an immediate known reference for me, but apparently looks an awful lot like the broken gate in Nagasaki that half survived the atomic bomb. That's not a real happy reminder, so this toy didn't go over well. The company and journalists have attempted to deflect all of this criticism as just angry Westerners posting complaints in Japanese after using a translator, and a few of those cases have been found. However, there are also plenty of Japanese YouTubers echoing these thoughts, and Ubisoft did put out an apology in Japanese for the historical inaccuracies. So they obviously know it's not just angry American anime fans. After the disastrous launch of Outlaws and the reportedly low pre-sales for Shadows, Ubisoft finally canceled a couple of press meetings and previews for the game at the Tokyo Game Show, and then they formally announced the delay of the entire game to 2025. The current date is February 14. Oh, dropping it during Black History Month? No, that's good. That's subtle. Nobody's going to notice that. So Ubisoft knows things are very bad, as evidenced not just by the delay of the game, but also by the change in price structure and distribution. This is a huge win for gamers. This is a very scummy company that has been extremely successful by treating their customers like crap. And if they're making changes, it signals that those customers have finally had enough. And it signals to other companies, hey, don't try this stuff The gamers are onto it. Some executives aren't ready to make the change, though, like Stevie Chessard, who made this whiny post on LinkedIn. LinkedIn? How is this even news? How did anybody even find this? I thought posting on LinkedIn was like a tree falling in the forest. Anyway, Stevie took to the heavily trafficked site to bemoan people like, me, honestly, who don't have enough hands to hold and eat our popcorn while also waving a foam finger and performing the 90s classic Triple H move, the suck it. Here's live footage of me hearing the news about the delay and admitted defeat from the CEO.
Oh, that's terrible.
You seem kind of psyched.
No, I'm bummed. But I wasn't bummed. I was stoked.
All right, let's be serious for a minute, because Stevie is sad and ashamed. Not ashamed to have the job of monetization director, where he has to figure out new and inventive ways to extract every last cent from his own audience. No, he's ashamed of you guys for not guzzling the swill that his company has been pumping out for years. He's also ashamed of fellow industry folks who are also celebrating. You see, Stevie doesn't realize what he and his company are doing to the industry, as well as other big names like EA, Take-Two, and Blizzard. These companies are so disgusting and manipulative, putting out bland garbage designed only as a vehicle for monetization. They are pissing in the pool of the game industry, and it's turning the entire audience off. Other people in the industry do realize this, and they are just as excited as the customer to see this horrible company and its awful executives fail. We are not in the same boat, Stevie. We don't even want to be in the same ocean with you slimy pieces of crap, and we aren't wishing for failure just because we aren't being catered to. We're wishing for justice, because Ubisoft and others have been delivering minimum viable products for years and using every psychological manipulation tactic known to man to hoodwink the audience, thanks to people like Stevie, and it's past time for them to receive the financial backlash for it.
You think this is funny?
Well, Terry, it sure as shit ain't sad.
The delay of AC Shadows was also a win in that it's a blow against the gross pricing structure of single-player games. With the delay, Ubisoft announced refunds for all orders and stated that future pre-orders will get the first of 2 expansions for free. They are also dropping the Season Pass model for this game. This is important because that Season Pass was not only a way to upsell higher price tiers, but also a way to keep players in the subscription waiting for that next drop. In addition to that, they're opening up sales to all stores, including Steam. Now, when you buy games for a console, you use the store that's built into that console. When you buy games for PC, there are so many options. The largest PC storefront, far and away, is Steam, controlling about 75% of the market, with everyone else fighting over the scraps. A few years ago, Epic Games, makers of Fortnite, launched their own store, and then larger companies like Blizzard and Ubisoft have their own stores. The reason something like Ubisoft wants to avoid Steam is because they take a 30% cut of the sale for the first $10 million, then 25% until $50 million, and then 20% thereafter. On the other hand, Epic Games takes just 12%, flat rate. Of course, if players buy straight through Ubisoft, the profit is 100%, and the players can get caught in that Ubisoft credit loop. The move to open sales up to all platforms shows how desperate the company is, which shows that players have had it with the hoops they have to jump through in order to play these mediocre games. After the lackluster second quarter performance, CEO Yves Guillemot put out a statement to investors about the actions that the board is taking. Now, this is kind of hard to read because it's in corporatese, but there are 2 key things to note. One is that they aren't fully getting the message quite yet. The second paragraph states that, although they aren't seeing benefits yet, quote, "We keep on our strategy, focusing on 2 key verticals, open world adventures and gas native experiences, with the objective to drive growth and robust free cash flow generation." The open world adventures are those generic games that are all pretty much the same like we talked about, and they're going to continue to lean into those. In addition to gas experiences, that stands for Games as a Service, which is the full legal name for live service games. These are generally bare bones at launch, but they promise so much continued content, you guys. if you gamers keep playing and paying. Originally, it was supposed to be a cool idea. Like, what if your favorite game just kept getting updates and new stuff? No more waiting for a sequel. You can keep playing the same game, but with additional goodies as time goes on. Its actual execution is a cancer on the games industry, and it's the second pillar in Ubisoft's strategy that they are keeping on. One such game is an online shooter called XDefiant. In a call about the second quarter results, Guillemot put most of the blame on the soft performance of Star Wars Outlaws, but also said that XDefiant isn't doing so well either. The company isn't performing across the board, and articles like this one from Inverse can try to pretend that the whole audience is just full of istaphobes, but the real truth is that the customer is tired of being screwed and they are walking away, just like we're seeing in the TV and movie industries. Guillemot ended that letter by addressing those horrible, toxic players directly, trying to reaffirm that they make entertainment products first, creating games for the broadest possible audience, and their goal is not to push any specific agenda. First, that broadest audience possible comment is part of the issue. Much like the MCU, their games are stale because every one of them needs massive sales just to break even. So they're always too safe. Boring. The production pipeline is too long, leaving them stuck, always chasing trends and incurring enormous cost. However, that last bit about agendas is comical. And you know what? I actually believe them. I don't think that K-Vess from Outlaws or Yasuke in Shadows are pushing an agenda. They're attempting to ride an agenda, performatively, which is so much worse. Ubisoft is like a guy trying to pick up chicks at an abortion rally, or get an invite to a cookout by changing his Twitter profile to a black square. However, there is a little evidence that there is actually an agenda, as evidenced by this story that flared up a few weeks ago. Ubisoft started a mentorship program to encourage new developers with less than 2 years in the industry, which sounds cool. The problem is that the program is only open to people identifying as women or non-binary. No boys allowed. This is a really funny result that you see with folks who buy into critical theory philosophy, assuming that most programmers are guys because most of management is guys, so girls must be getting left out. Obviously, the best way to fight inferred discrimination is with actual discrimination. Or, they could go with top-down restructuring of the executive structure, which allowed mass harassment for years. Either one, I guess. But this goes back to a core issue with the company. They're not interested in making excellent games. They're interested in appealing to current year ideas of social justice and duping you into spending more money for their basic products. If you, the player, were the number one priority of the company, they wouldn't be suffering from half of their current problems. One of those problems is the stock chart. You don't have to be a financial expert to see that looks bad. And it reflects the low investor confidence that the company can right the ship as their terrible track record keeps getting longer. Rumors have been circulating about the Guillemot family, who own 20% of the company, being in talks to sell the entire thing to Tencent, China's largest games company. That may or may not be true, but it is true that one of their activist investors, AJ Investments, is trying to force the company into a sale. They laid out their complaints and plan in this open letter. Finally, the company is facing legal and union pressure. At the end of September, the French Video Games Union called for 3 days of striking in response to Ubisoft's new demand that all workers come back to the office for 3 days a week. Tensions have already been high in France, as the union was already trying to restore profit sharing and raise wages for some of those workers. That strike is set to be on October 15 through 17. And as I was finishing this up, a new class action lawsuit has just been filed alleging that Ubisoft was sharing user information with Meta without users' knowledge or consent. That right there is pretty much where I left it in October. Thinking that, since there were no more big game releases this year, they would just quietly lick their AC Shadows wounds, and that would be the end of the problems for 2024. Past Greg, you sweet summer child. Yves Guillemot said, "Hold my Sauvignon," and a few other pieces of drama snuck in before the calendar turned over, so let's cover those. And this also gives me a chance to visit some things that should have gone into that first video, but
I'm a knucklehead at times.
Right before that earnings call and letter to investors, Guillemot also put out an internal letter to the company, which naturally got leaked right away. It's quite telling about Ubisoft's attitude toward the players. At first, Yves says Star Wars Outlaws didn't sell so well despite solid ratings. It got a 76 on Metacritic. Well, first of all, 76 isn't really something to write home about, but there's more here. 76 is the critic score. That's professional game journalists. The user score that I grabbed in the middle of December is 5.3 out of 10. That's actually higher than it used to be, owing to the recent fixes and patches. What this tells us about the CEO is that he doesn't care about you and your experience. He cares about the headlines and the critical reception. If only the critics could purchase the millions of copies that they needed to sell.
If onlys and justs were candies and nuts, then every day would be earned to Donkfest.
The next line is revealing as well. In today's ultra-competitive market, players expect extraordinary experiences and ultra-polished games on day one. This feels very much like last year's Baldur's Gate 3 is an anomaly and players shouldn't expect this kind of excellence all the time. So sorry that we expect games to work at launch, which Outlaws did not, requiring that progress resetting patch that we talked about earlier. But Mr. Guillemot went on to address the delay of Assassin's Creed Shadows, saying that, quote, "The game is already playable and of high quality and has all the features the team wanted to integrate into this ambitious experience. This unusual decision at such an advanced stage is motivated by our desire to offer an optimal experience from launch on all platforms and various PC configurations, and to remove the small frictions we typically used to address in post-launch title updates." Post-launch title updates. It sounds super corporate. What did we used to call that?
Patch.
That's the one. So the game was not ready to ship, just like Outlaws wasn't ready and is only fully playable now, months after release. You can see here that the company knows they release buggy crap and simply expect players to lap it up and stick around while they address these small frictions in post-launch patches. They don't care about your experience, and this memo shows multiple ways that is true. It also reveals why players don't buy their games at launch anymore, thankfully, because more and more people see that the game won't be finished for a few months after launch. That kills the momentum of the game and wastes all the marketing money. Prince of Persia came out earlier this year, and reviews are generally very positive. My guess is that many skipped it because Ubisoft at launch, and then something else came up and they never went back to buy it. The game was barely marketed and didn't sell well, so of course Ubisoft disbanded the team and won't be making a sequel. Real quick, in November there was a short news cycle about Ubisoft's Rainbow Six Siege suggesting that they had just released a skin for one of their operators that looked like 2B, if 2B were a heavily shouldered man with a strong jawline and a thick neck. I'm not entirely sure what kicked this one off. Perhaps it was just a convenient comparison to the recent 2B skin in Stellar Blade, which looked much more like its namesake. But it turns out this was not a new release. This is a premium skin released in 2022 for the Rainbow Six character Iana, who, yeah, she's pretty masculine looking, so that's kind of a strange one to go with. However, I looked at the other female operators they have, and well, they're all kind of masculine, which does track since this is supposed to be a more realistic tactical military shooter. That, of course, begs the question why 2B would ever be a crossover skin. Money, obviously, but they tried to spin it, saying that it wasn't actually 2B, it was in fact a new class, G2. Doesn't make it any better, but whatever. Hey, while we're on the topic, if you've never played Nier Automata, where 2B is from, I cannot suggest it strongly enough. You might see this character model and just think the whole game is about watching those fangs thanging around, but I can assure you that this is an excellent experience that not only plays smoothly, featuring a fun combat system, but more importantly, it's got a story that gets downright philosophical. Oh sure, you start out as a hot anime chick with a giant sword, but before too long, you're exploring perceptions of loyalty, what it means to be human, and the purpose of life. I am not exaggerating in any way. But back to Ubisoft, at the beginning of December, that low performance for XDefiant reared its head when the company announced the game would be shutting down for good in June of 2025. As of December 3rd, if you hadn't downloaded and started the game, you never will. And this one confused me because I was aware that it wasn't doing amazing numbers, but it was still respectable. So I dug into it, and all the normal Ubisoft corporate problems are here. First, the same bloated budgets and team sizes. Let's look at the internal memo by Senior VP of Studio Operations, Mary Sophie de Waber, after the announcement that XDefiant was shutting down. She says they weren't able to attract and retain enough players to support the game, and confirms that 2 studios will be shut down because of it, with a third following, it sounds like. The important thing here is the statement that almost half of the team will be moved around inside Ubisoft, but another 280 are getting let go entirely. Now, if that is a little more than half, we could infer that this game had about 500 people working on it. Assuming a total burn of $200,000 per person per year, that's $100 million a year on this game. They announced it in 2021, and various reports, and let's be honest, hearsay, put the start of development between 2018 and 2020. If 500 was the average team size, then total development cost is perhaps $400 to $500 million, maybe more. With what we've seen of their other games, this is not really that surprising. Now, with that in mind, let's do a little bit of napkin math on what the game could have been making this year. Now, keep in mind, these numbers are accurate in the way that snowfall predictions are accurate, but we're going to try to get close. Free-to-play games like this need free players to turn into paying customers, and various studies will put conversion rates at 2%, some as high as 25%. The trouble is that the methods and measures are just all over the place, mostly relying on self-reporting, and usually they include mobile games, but they don't break the numbers down between mobile, console, and PC. Even worse, XDefiant was not on Steam, only on Ubisoft's Uplay, which doesn't have public player numbers. Ubisoft did say that over 10 million people played the game during the launch month, but we really don't have much else to go on. Different sites will try to guess based on Google Trends and Twitch watch time, but the numbers are very rough. This one thinks the game had about 1.5 million monthly players since launch, which is a little higher and a little lower than some other guesses. That's why I'm going with that one. Let's just assume 10% of players buy something. Most of the average purchases were about 10 to 15 bucks. The lowest Founders Pack was 20, but you do have whales. Let's just say the average player was spending $40. With these assumptions, the first month might have seen $40 million in sales, with each following month getting about $6 million, for a 7-month total of roughly $75 million. It could be in the ballpark because last year a LinkedIn post by marketing executive Sam Salaba, who claims to work with Blizzard and others, stated that Overwatch 2, with its 50 million accounts, made $225 million seemingly in its first year. The post is kind of vague. That's an average of $4.50 per account. So using that assumption, XDefiant might have been making as much as $100 million since launch. If these numbers are somewhat near accurate, then this game is barely making back the cost of the team this year, which does nothing to pay back that $400 to $500 million that we speculated on, or make any money for the future. However, I've got to be shooting high, because if my numbers are right and the game was like paying for itself but not really profiting, I have trouble thinking that the company would shut it down. But that internal memo stated that they didn't see a path forward that made investing in the game worthwhile. So that leads me to believe that it's making far less than our little guesstimate right there, and it's actively costing money to keep it online.
You're nothing to me now. You're not a brother. You're not a friend.
I'm not much into shooters these days, especially of the online variety, so I went to find out why nobody is playing or paying. It seems that the cosmetics just weren't fantastic, and from the gameplay that I saw, looks like they were going for a blend of realistic military and also futuristic fun, but not really leaning enough into one or the other. So you can't look like a badass SEAL Team 6 warrior like a Battlefield or a Call of Duty might offer, but you also can't have a sweet Gundam armor suit like Hero Shooter Paladins once offered, and I almost bought because it was freaking sweet. But that was during the loot box era, and I was not about to pay for the chance to win it. Many of the Reddit comments that I read are just saying the cosmetics weren't great, so they passed. But it seems that the real reason that the game lost players is on the technical end. The game had an early beta in April of 2023, and when it launched in May of 24, many of the issues from the beta were still present. The netcode is a common complaint, meaning that there was a huge disconnect between what you saw on screen and what the server said was going on. Sometimes bullets weren't hitting what was right in front of you, or you would get shot after ducking behind cover or around a corner. These kinds of frustrations in a fast-paced online shooter are just unacceptable for most players. They're not going to stick around for that. The game also took longer than anticipated to make and wasn't fully finished when it launched, and the drip feed of new content that keeps a live service game alive was dripping a bit too slowly. Almost all of these technical problems were due to the game engine that they were forced to use, which was Snowdrop. That's what Ubisoft wanted to adopt across all of their studios. Mark, the other sandwich Rubin, who was the executive producer for XDefiant, admitted that Snowdrop was not designed for first-person shooters, and that led to the team having to create a lot of their own tools, in addition to making the game. In their defense, it's not like they had any bad examples they could have learned from where like a giant corporation forced all of their studios to use a cold weather themed game engine and then had multiple development difficulties because of it. How could they have known? All of this boils down to poor management at Ubisoft. These are the kinds of lazy actions and boardroom decisions that get made by out-of-touch executives. Trend chasing by making a Call of Duty clone with not much to differentiate it? Check. Bloated departments and throwing money at problems until all of a sudden they pull the plug based on spreadsheets because it isn't instantly making $6 billion a year like Fortnite? Check. Trying to save money on paper by forcing everyone to use a proprietary engine even though it doesn't work for every genre? Check. Leaning into cool-sounding new technologies like blockchain and NFTs? Oh god, check. Yeah, this quarter they released not one, but 2 NFT games. You get to own part of these games. You get to control your financial future. See, it's not really a game. When you think about it, it's an investment. This isn't what we meant when we said we wanted to own our games. We just wanted to not be told that the traditional games were actually licenses that could be revoked at will. That's all, okay? Instead, we got Champion Tactics Grimoria Chronicles, which sounds like a mobile game, and Captain Laserhawk, which actually sounds like a game that I would buy if it were published by Devolver and, didn't involve NFTs. Laserhawk is, I'm just finding out, a cartoon on Netflix from last year featuring Rayman and other Ubisoft properties. Now it's a game that you can't play if you don't link your crypto wallet. This article says that it will launch on Ethereum Layer 2 Arbitrum next week with a free NFT mint on Magic Eden. I don't know what any of those words mean, so let's move on. Their other game snuck onto the market a month ago. It's a PvP amiibo game with NFTs, and you buy everything with a crypto coin called Oasis. Trying to go the crypto route should not be a surprise for anyone, really, because Ubisoft tested this out a couple of years ago with Ghost Recon Breakpoint with a new service called Quartz. You know what's better than regular microtransaction digital cosmetic crap that you pay real money for? Microtransaction digital cosmetic crap that you pay for, but has a unique NFT serial number. And you can only use it in the one game. Your basic helmet isn't like the other 100,000 helmets. Yours has a little serial number on it and your name. You own it! So long as the game stays online.
Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it.
The Champion Tactics marketplace is already getting stupid, with the amiibos going for hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars. Once again, Ubisoft is showing up late and doing something that most folks think is scummy. And now, they are funged. And now here we are at the end of the year with rumors of a sale to Tencent being stronger than ever. So strong, in fact, that the company stock actually jumped on hopes that someone competent would come in and fix things. There's even a rather large belief that this year has all been on purpose, a ploy to drive the stock price down so the Guillemets and perhaps Tencent can scoop it up and take it private. Do you understand how poorly a company has to be run? How many terrible decisions have to be made back to back before people start to think that it's a conspiracy to ruin the company on purpose? This is insane. However, might be the only way out. They either go private or they sell to Tencent, which the Guillemets are rumored to be reluctant to do because they want to stay in control of the company that they started, or they get broken up because I don't think any other company can acquire them. They are large, remember, and both Europe and the US would likely block such a sale anyway because they want to prevent monopolies. At this point, it feels like Ubisoft is worth more in pieces, selling off some of their famous IPs and associated studios instead of being sold as a package deal. Or, I guess, it is possible that they could rise from the ashes, but that might be an impossible timeline. They would need Assassin's Creed Shadows to be a massive success, selling millions and millions of copies, allowing them to then start developing new games, which would take a few years to get out the door. That letter to the investors, however, seems like they would just stay the course, even if they get a big cash infusion. So I have no hope for them. I do have hope that you will tell me your thoughts on the company and its games. Do you think that they'll sell or get broken up or succeed against all odds? What did you think of some of their games this year? Let me know your thoughts and your predictions below. I appreciate you spending your time with me, and I'll see you next time.